At 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I am Janet Evans, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage, and links to these documents can also be found in the description section of the YouTube live stream for anyone watching there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones or phones unless you're speaking. If you're in the room, please ensure that your cell phones are silenced. As we move through the meeting, I will introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote is taken, I will restate a motion as well as who motioned and seconded. If at any point you have trouble hearing me or any other board member, please say so. I will now call roll. Andy let us know that he will not be with us tonight. Sherry? Here. Ginny? Here. Dick?
Here.
Lynn?
Here.
Tina?
Here.
Jess?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Ashley?
Here.
Blakey?
Here.
And Janet is here. Thank you. Okay, our timekeeper tonight is Tina Horn. Announcement of closed meetings, special meetings to be held. There was a closed meeting of the CA Board of Directors on October 29th. Meeting started at 5:01 p.m. The vote to close was 8 in favor, 0 against. The meeting was closed based on consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. And the purpose of the meeting was to discuss Symphony of Lights. The meeting closed at 5:58 p.m. Columbia Association Architectural Resource Committee held a closed meeting on Monday, November 8th. The meeting started at 1:04 p.m., ended at 2:18 p.m. Vote to close was 3 in favor, 0 against. Reason to close was discussion of new and ongoing covenant cases, HOA Section 11B4, consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, and other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Ginny moves.
Second.
Dick seconds. Any objection? Unanimous? Okay, we will now move on to resident speak out. I'll remind everyone that you get 3 minutes as an individual or 5 minutes if you're representing an organization. And we will start with Eric Kosmal.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I represent the Aquatics Committee, and basically wanted to say that most importantly to us in the budgeting process is that we believe in growing and supporting of aquatics throughout Columbia, and the biggest budgeting thing we would recommend against would be we would recommend against anything that limits community access to aquatics facilities and programming to only summer months or a limited portion of the year. So we would ask that whatever budget decisions are made in regards to things that we work very hard to make sure our year-round aquatics are not affected. Some of the things that we've discussed along the way and what's important to us is we think we have a lot of pools, particularly in the summer months. And one of the things we said, if we're trying to be a little more cost effective or try to find ways to lessen the budget, was potentially taking some of our low attendance pools, 1 or 2 of them to start with, and maybe building community splash pads, which would be less money to operate, easier potentially to maintain, and offer some different opportunities for residents. We know that in order to potentially increase the usage and maybe even memberships was the concept of one pool in each of the villages that have multiple pools that have a low attendance for the typically, to offer them as maybe a pool that you get with a reduced rate. You can only go to that pool, but you get a reduced rate to go to that pool. So maybe we up some memberships. Right now we have the free second Sundays. We thought that either we could get rid of that altogether, or in some way conjunction with each Columbia card member having passes to use that would allow them to use it at some other time other than just those Sundays, so that people would feel like they have more choice in what they get from their aquatics options. We also, in looking through the different scenarios that were presented, like the idea of each department versus individual facility covering their changeable costs. We thought that sharing those within each department could potentially help the budget. We talked about if we wanted to help our Columbia Association members out, that perhaps there's a way to work out discounted ticket packages to either the pool or other facilities that they could use on any given day. And that led into the idea of perhaps a la carte ticketing type thing for members to be able to buy in or buy out as they wanted to. But those are some of the things that we brainstormed in our last couple meetings that we thought were things we'd recommend from the aquatic side of things. I also wanted to mention that one of the recent members that joined our board also deals a lot with the Special Olympics and their aquatics programming, and that with the Howard Community College closing their pool, the Aquatics Committee and the Columbia Association have agreed to partner with them, and they are very grateful and appreciate our aquatics programming. Hope to continue that partnership and perhaps grow. And as such, they also the person that on our committee pointed out wanted to, though he couldn't speak out tonight, personally wanted to point out that, it's also not just the Columbia Aquatic Association, but the Clippers organization itself, who does a lot of help for them in regards to making things happen. And so continuing partnerships like that and finding ways to keep that programming alive was, from the budgeting standpoint, was important to them as well. So I think that is all I have for you for this evening. I appreciate your time. So does the committee. And we appreciate your consideration of aquatics as we go forward with this budgeting process.
Thank you, Eric. Ginny?
Quick question. Congratulations on your partnership with the Special Olympics. Thank you. But do you have a waiting list for people that want to be on the Clippers? You've had that in the past. Is there still a problem with that?
I don't know if this year there is. And with COVID, I'm not sure how that worked out.
Okay. Okay.
So I apologize that I don't know that off the top of my head.
Well, maybe if you could get back to us, yeah. I'm just wondering if we were turning away children before. I'm just wondering if we're still doing that. But if you could get back to us, thanks.
Dan,
I would be happy to do
do you know the
that.
answer to that?
So we've managed to, at the moment, alleviate the majority of the wait list for Clippers by adding another session into the swim center, actually into Supreme, I'm sorry. So there's a clinic that they're actively participating and then rolling up to the Clippers. So we have, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe we've managed most of the kids off the wait list and have them engaged in the program.
Dick?
Yes, Eric, could you give me a really quick overview of what we do for swimming lessons? Do we have any programs that are...
We do currently have programs. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we had worked on through COVID, with pools being closed and people being unhappy with limited pools and stuff, was we moved a lot of the programming around, and from one pool to another, we consolidated. One of the big things we heard from Clippers parents, for instance, was having one kid at one age group swim at one pool on the same night they're swimming at the other older kid was swimming at another pool was really challenging to getting around. And so we tried to consolidate the Clippers into the Aquatic Center. And as a result, they moved into, I think, a mostly after 6-ish time frame. One of the big things we had heard about the swim lessons was previously we've been offering those between 6 and say 8, and a lot of people felt that was a little too late for the young kids. So those were moved to earlier after school into up to the 6 o'clock hour. And what Marty was reporting to us, I believe last night, was that basically all of the swim lessons sold out in the first day of registration, and that they are currently looking at trying to find more ways to see if we can add some time around that. So I'd like to say yes, we do, and at least right now they're pretty successful.
Well, thank you. That sounds great. How many kids roughly do you have in the swim lesson program?
I would have to leave that answer to Marty because that's not something we necessarily we talk about, but I don't keep that information to hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric?
This might be a question, more of a question for Marty, but do we have any updates on the lifeguard situation for the summer?
Yeah, I think all of the details around the swimming program itself are better suited for Marty. Let's not put Eric on the spot with trying to cite statistics.
Hey, what I can tell you about the lifeguarding situations, I've done everything I can. All of the children in my home that are eligible to be lifeguards are lifeguards. But my understanding is it's probably also going to be a tough go again this year, but we're hoping that I know they're doing some recruitment efforts. Marty had some numbers on that and some specific things they were doing to try to get people in the door earlier than last year, so hopefully we can open all 23 pools. But
We started recruitment for lifeguards November 1st.
yeah, I was going to say, I know some things are already underway.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up we have Matthew Shell.
Appreciate it. And Eric, I appreciate you covering Clippers. So just background, I'm the chair for the board for the Columbia Aquatics Association, which is Clippers, parent board, and I'm also a resident of Dorsey Search. Columbia Aquatics Association is a 501c3 public charity and acts also as the parent board for the Clippers swim team. I'm here today representing my organization, the CA board, and our membership, which is about 350 Clippers families, the majority of which are also members of Columbia Association. A lot of us, like myself, are residents as well. As a background, I'm a swimmer myself. Swam growing up, participated in master swimming with you guys at CA. Done a number of other things, open water events and triathlons and otherwise. So I am a nationally certified swim official. I run and help with a lot of the meets, both summer and winter year-round for you guys, and volunteer pretty much for all of the Clippers swim meets. So the Columbia Aquatics Association, for, like I said, those that don't know, we're 501c3. We started in 1974 to foster and promote aquatics activities in the children of Howard County. That's in our Articles of Incorporation. Clippers runs as a unique hybrid between the Columbia Association and our Columbia Aquatics Association Incorporated. CA manages the coaches, the practices, and the facilities. We handle the events, organization, team building, volunteerism, and many other aspects around the team. So, we host the events outside of the Clippers as well. So we run an annual Howard County High School swim meet, which we partnered with Columbia Association this year to run. A lot of you may know that we also sponsor the Clegg Memorial Scholarship, which is a scholarship eligible for Clipper swimmers that are going to college for books and other things like that. A little bit about the Clippers this year in 2021, 2022. Historically, everyone probably knows this. We're the largest swim team in Maryland. I already gave some numbers earlier, and a lot of you know that without, your organization support and our kind of strong parent group, the different types of activities as well as the CA staff, would not happen without all of those items working together for CNSL and the Clippers, and kind of bringing together that opportunity. opportunities. So first, I just really wanted to come today to thank the CA board and the staff for continuing to support us during the pandemic. Appreciate the support of the CA board in supporting year-round aquatics activities, both indoor and outdoor. What we see in the current environment, obviously Eric mentioned the Howard County closure and the impact that that has. We see a lot of aquatics programs and swim teams struggling. And I believe that this extraordinary environment, maintaining this year-round avenue, for all of our stakeholders is critically important. Thanks to the CA board, the staff, and my organization's active parents, we see the Clippers is doing better than most of the programs. And I really want to thank you for allowing that to happen by maintaining kind of our indoor pools and doing some of the items that Eric talked about. I think it's important to acknowledge that without CA's support, as Eric also talked about, we would not, see some of the different items such as Special Olympics being able to happen. And we also wouldn't have seen the high school meet happen this year. We know that Howard County and Howard County schools do not provide year-round swimming support. We know that drowning is one of the top 5 causes of death in people age 1 to 14. A lot of people don't understand how critically important that CA is to being a backstop and providing these educational opportunities, for our area. So when I think about the mission of CA, the vision, the strategic priorities, and those items, I believe that year-round swimming is critically important to maintaining the quality of life, the educational resources, the inclusion items, and many other items that are talked about in there. I hope that the board takes a balanced approach to this budget cycle with no drastic priority changes. As a business person myself, I know and understand that the CA board has some tough choices to make. Those require permanently closing some outdoor pool locations that don't make sense, redeploying those footprints to other usage. And there may be changes necessary to rebalance or ultimately, that might be, but ultimately we believe that it's necessary to maintain year-round swimming as options to Columbia residents. So I really appreciate your availability for me to make a couple of remarks today. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Matthew. Are there any questions for Matthew? Okay, doesn't look like it. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Jacob Feldman. Jacob, if you're, there we go.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Thanks for giving me a few moments to speak. I've been a CA member my whole life in some capacity, and now with my wife and kids, make sure it's important that, we are a part of CA, and it's great opportunities. I felt compelled to, and thank you for putting out the email that we could do this. It's great, you should do it often, I guess. So I'm involved with the golf package, the 5-day golf package, and specifically my question is, why is it to add the fit package onto the top of the golf package? It's like $130 more. Whereas if I was to individually, the golf package didn't have it. If I just wanted to get a fit package, it's like $60. So we're talking more than double. And just in deconstructing the whole membership thing, it's simple. It's great. But I think it needs to be a little bit more customizable. And I've talked to Lisa when I got hooked up at Hobbits Glen in March with the golf package, and it ultimately took me away from my wife and kids. They've got their package. It was all weird how it happened. So I ultimately got off of their plan because if I stuck with them, they'd all have to be on the golf thing, which can be pricey, as you know. And just specifically, why is it that it costs more to add the fit package to the golf than if I was just to go out and get the fit package? And I talked to a sales representative like in the summertime at some point. Rodney, the new GM, I brought to his attention October 2nd at the match play thing. I look forward to the turkey shootout at Hobbits on the 20th. but he thought it was crazy. And so I've talked to a couple people about this, and in the least, can I get somebody's information to follow up with it? Because, I mean, it's kind of backwards.
I can respond that Dan Burns, who is Vice President of Community Programs and Services, that is his division, and I can have him follow up directly with you. We have your contact information from your registration this evening, so I can have him follow up directly.
That'd be great. And I'd like to see all the pools open this summer. That'd be great. So take care, and thanks again.
Thank you, Jacob. Any other questions? All right, next up, we have Ray Levesque.
Hi, good evening. Appreciate the time to talk to you. My name is Ray Levesque, and I'm here to speak tonight in support of the Columbia Clippers. My wife and I have lived here in Columbia for about 20 years. We were drawn here by many of the things, including the nature of Columbia as we see it, which, looking to be an inclusive, diverse community with all of various amenities, many things that we really found attractive. And we moved here knowing it would be more expensive than nearby communities, both because of higher home prices and because of the additional annual charge to fund CA. And we did that knowing that those funds were key to making Columbia part of what we see as Columbia, or some of the key aspects of that. And that includes a lot of things, a lot of amenities that we use, and also a lot of amenities that we don't, but that we know others in the community really enjoy and value. And that makes sense for a community this size. I mean, we're 100,000 people, and so we're not going to use everything that we support through a community effort like this. For example, I've never set foot in the nor caused wear and tear in the Long Reach Tennis Club, but I help pay for it every year. Same with the golf courses, and I'm fine with that because I think it helps support what we want in this community. Rather, I find it consistent with a democracy and a capitalistic society in which each of us kind of votes with our dollars. And that by doing that, by paying, in some instances, a reasonable fee for the use of the facilities we value, then we indicate which ones, are valuable to us. And over the years, we've definitely benefited from what CA provides. The open space, the paths, I think everybody agrees, those are, key to what, is key to Columbia. And the tot lots were really important to us when our sons were young. I'd say over the past decade or so, we've been really big users of Columbia's swim facilities, and in particular, the Clippers.
1 minute.
By our own choice, we pay CA, a significant amount for our sons to be able to swim on Clippers. In fact, the fees we pay for CA for them to be on Clippers is more than twice what we pay in the annual charge each year. And we also, we do that because we value what our kids get out of Clippers. We also volunteer in support of Clippers and like a high school swim meet, probably on the order of 50 to 100 hours a year. And again, we do that because we see Clippers having a very positive impact on our sons in a lot of ways as they grow up. The more that I've studied this, the more I'm inclined to believe that, the Clippers families, and this is probably true of others who use, certain facilities, like whether it's golf or tennis or others, that, the Clippers disproportionately fund the CA Aquatics. I mean, based on the 2020 budget, Clippers generated 76% of the aquatics revenues and funded 71% of the CA Aquatics expenses. And, combining that with what the Clippers families pay to be on the team, with the annual charges and the CA memberships, it's likely that they're funding, close to the majority of the CA Aquatics expenses.
Excuse me, Ray. You're at time, so if you could please wrap up.
Okay.
Comments. Thank you.
I just going to say that based on the budgeting scenarios, which I realize they may have been more to, tease out some different characteristics of the thing, they did seem rather alarming, in that it seemed like they were looking at potentially taking away some of the things that we think are really key services from Columbia Association. So I encourage you, to not take drastic moves in that respect. And I appreciate the effort you're doing. I know it's a challenging job you've got in front of you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions for Ray? Lynn?
Ray, what are the key services that you're concerned about being eliminated or reduced?
My understanding specifically in scenario 2 that was in the budgeting exercise that would envision an increase in the cost of clippers, swimmers swimming on the clippers team by approximately 20%. And in scenario 3, it might be as much as 100 or 200% increase, which I think would make clippers, not competitive at all with surrounding teams in terms of the cost, and would probably, might cause the clippers team to be shut down.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Farida Ghazdar.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Farida Ghazdar, and I've lived in Town Center since 2003. Our family moved to Columbia in 1985 when we moved into our first home in Kings Contrivance. Multicultural diversity is why we chose to live in Columbia. My husband passed away and my children moved away, but I continue to live in Columbia because of its ethnic, linguistic, and cultural diversity. I was born in India, but my ethnicity is not Indian. 80% of Indians are Hindus, but I am not. I'm a Parsi, which means someone from Persia. My ancestors moved to India from Persia around the 8th century due to religious persecution. My religion is Zoroastrianism, the oldest monotheistic religion, one you are born into and cannot convert to. Without the multicultural programs hosted by the CA's International Multicultural Advisory Council, known as IMAC, stories like mine would not be heard and people like me would not have a voice. Especially in today's sometimes divisive world, it is crucially important that CA continue to fund the sister cities and multicultural programs so we can all learn about each other's culture and live in harmony with each other. Last summer's anti-Asian violence makes us realize that there's more work to be done. Columbia is not a bubble removed from the rest of the world. CA, as our homeowners association that we pay yearly taxes to, is in the best position to fund programs that enhance our community's rich diversity. The Sister Cities program started in the 70s with Cergy-Pontoise in France being Colombia's first sister city. The high school student exchange program with Cergy-Pontoise was later joined by one in Tres Cantos, Spain, and has been active annually ever since. Over the past few years, we added youth exchanges with our Chinese and Ghanaian sister cities. That's 40 plus years of our young people traveling abroad, living with host families, immersing in their daily life, learning the language and culture, and hosting foreign students in their Columbia home. No textbook can replicate this life-changing experience. Columbia now has sorry?
I think there's a little bit of feedback on the line. We can hear you fine.
Getting some feedback.
We can hear you fine, so if
Okay, may I continue?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Colombia now has 5 sister cities in 5 countries: France, Spain, Haiti, Ghana, and China. Last week, the Timor Ghana Sister City Committee members served as hosts at an event at the Ghanaian Embassy in Washington, D.C. to welcome the new ambassador, the first Ghanaian woman ambassador. Even though we can't travel due to the pandemic, sister city exchanges continue virtually. Last summer, Chinese American students became e-pals, writing in Chinese to students in Columbia's sister city in China who wrote back in English. They corrected each other's papers, creating friendships between our 2 communities. In the past few years, a teacher from Columbia taught English to Chinese students online. EPAL programs with students in French and Spanish 5 AP began this school year. I have lived and worked in Colombia since the 80s and retired from Howard Community College a couple of years ago. One of my tasks was working with international visitors, including educators from China and Russia. I've always been involved in the community, formerly as a board member of FERN, now known as Luminous. Currently, I'm in the third of a 6-year term on the Howard County Commission for Women, appointed by the county executive. I've been a volunteer driver with Neighbor Ride for the past 6 years.
Excuse me, Farida?
Yes.
You're at time, so if you could please wrap up your comments.
Okay, just have a few more sentences. Thank you. I shared my background and culture with the community as a human book in a program hosted by the Howard County Library System. I've hosted a Hindi table at the World Language Cafe. I am on CA's IMAC committee, and I've helped at multicultural fairs at the mall and the recent Long Reach 50th anniversary. I attended two cooking demonstrations hosted by IMAC showcasing Chinese and Ghanaian cuisine. I've made numerous presentations about my religion to the World Religions class at HCC. Colombia is teeming with people like me willing to share our culture and learn from others. I urge the CA board to continue funding both the sister cities and multicultural programs so we can continue the important work of bringing people together and enhance our knowledge and understanding of each other so our children can inherit a more perfect world. Thank you.
Thank you, Farida. Any questions? Thank you. And thank you for your commitment and involvement in the diversity.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Chris Hefty.
Hello, my name is Christopher Hefty, and I'm speaking on behalf of the PFLAG Columbia Howard County Board. I am the fundraising coordinator, as well as the co-chair of the Howard County Pride. I'm here to support funding for the Inner Arbor Trust, as they are a significant member of the community. They provide high-quality, inclusive events, such as our own Howard County Pride event, and I believe that they are an important part of this community as a part of the central area Howard County and in Columbia. So, a majority of the events are free, and we like to see that because it's more accessible to all our community members. We heard recently that they hadn't been funded in the last few years, so we wanted to extend our support and advocate for more funding for the Inner Arbor Trust so they can continue to do such great programs, as well as for allowing us to be able to continue to work with them for our own events in the foreseeable future. That's pretty much all I had to say.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Appreciate you coming out.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Sophie James.
Hi, I'm here in Sophie's place. She unfortunately fell ill today, so I wish her to get well quick, but I did want to share some of the comments that she had shared with me. So she was going to come here tonight to speak on behalf of the laid-off workers at the Meriwether Lake House Hotel. She is one of those workers. She and her husband have worked there for the last 3 years prior to the pandemic. My name is David Carlton. I'm a bartender at Horseshoe Casino in Baltimore, but I've been on layoff due to the pandemic as well, and have been doing a lot of work with my union, Unite Here Local 7, who's also the union for the laid-off workers at Meriwether. So yesterday, I was helping Sophie put together her statement and just talking to her about her experience. And, I wanted to, in her absence, share some of her story. So she worked, as I said, she had worked in the hotel for 3 years prior to the pandemic with her husband. She worked in the laundry department. Her husband is a dishwasher in the restaurant. And the hotel just meant a whole lot to them, being like a solid job, a steady job with, relatively good wages and benefits that was near to their home in Columbia. It was easy to get to. And there was just a great community there among all the workers. Everybody who I've talked to at the hotel points out how much teamwork and community took place in that workplace. And a lot of it has to do with having people who've worked there for decades. There's some people who've worked there almost 30 years, and a lot of people who've worked there over a decade. So with that solid foundation, Sophie and her husband were looking to buy a house in Columbia, stop renting, and be able to have her daughter and her daughter's family move into the house. So that's what they were trying to do at the time that the pandemic hit. Obviously, at that point, they had to let go of those plans for a minute, and then we're hoping when everything got back to normal, they would be able to, pursue that dream again. Somehow, David Costello, the owner of the hotel, decided that Sophie and James's temporary layoff due to a global pandemic should turn into a permanent termination so that he could decrease the number of positions that were permanent at the hotel and replace them with temporary workers. I mentioned being laid off at the casino in Baltimore. I'm fortunate enough that in Baltimore City, they passed a law granting recall rights to people in my industry at hotels and large venues. Also, the union negotiated with the casino because the casino falls under Maryland law, not Baltimore City. But we negotiated to extend recall rights to the end of 2022. So I know I have a job to return to as more positions open up. From what we understand, the hotel is requesting an easement from the rear of their property through the Columbia Association property that runs along the bike path. The workers at the hotel are asking that you refuse to grant that permission for this path until the time the hotel respects the decades of hard work that these workers have put into that property. And brings them back to work with on the conditions they had at the time of the layoff. Working people are not disposable. David Costello wants the community's support. We ask, what has he done to earn it? Is David Costello acting as a good community partner and lifting up the community and its ideals? Those are questions we think are really important to ask. We know our answer. We'd ask you to ask that for yourself, and just wanted to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions? Jenny, quick one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, was her name Sophia or?
Sophie.
Sophie, I'm sorry.
Sophie.
We all hope that she'll be feeling better.
Yes,
What did she get any, was she entitled to, and did she receive any of the depending on who you listen to, $5-6 million in PPP?
Right. So my understanding of what the law requires with that money is it has, if you look at the paperwork, and we've seen the paperwork that was filed by David Costello, he said that he was going to give 100% to his employees.
Okay.
There were none at the time. The law doesn't really require it go to specific people, but certainly Sophie, as a 3-year employee there, would have been one of those people who should have received some. And no, she did not receive any, nor have any of the laid off, I believe, 110 workers.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, so you kind of started to answer my question. So you said 110. So it was 110 that were laid off, and were there any employees that were hired back, or did he hire all new, or were all new employees hired? Only positions in the housekeeping department have been offered for rehire. No one has been recalled in the sense that their prior position and seniority and all those things have been respected. But they did place, the hotel management company, Aimbridge, did put up an ad for housekeeping. So we had, I believe, 13 people apply for those positions. At this point, they've hired one housekeeper to return, and she's to begin on the 19th. So, Do you know if the wages were changed?
I'm not sure what kind of, wage scale or anything like that they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, Nina Basu with Inner Arbor Trust. You're muted, Nina.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. And we will follow up this resident speak out with a written request from the Inner Arbor Trust as well. I wanted to thank CA for its partnership, not only this year, but also going back to CA forming the Inner Arbor Trust in 2013. We're here today to ask that in the FY23 budget that the Inner Arbor Trust is again included. We certainly understand that CA has had very, like much of the world, very interesting and difficult financial time, and that there are a number of competing priorities. But I'm here today to ask this board to invest in its community and to invest in the environment and intentional inclusivity and a place for everyone. And yes, I'm here to ask this board to invest in providing overwhelmingly free services for everybody in the community. I just wanted to, quickly, for those of you who may not know, after the trust was formed, CA provided an initial, very generous $1.4 million grant. To date, the trust has raised in operating and capital in excess of $1.3 million. We're so close to being able to say $1.4 million. Give me another couple weeks, we'll get there. Of that money, the vast majority of that money was raised from sources other than Columbia Association, but every penny of money we have raised has been invested back into not only CA property, but into the community that we serve and the community that CA serves through our guardianship of Symphony Woods, our improvements in Symphony Woods, and of course, our inclusive programming. Despite the pandemic, we were able to have an incredibly successful season, with highlights such as our free BSO concert, our Cultura Planera concert, with a wonderful local partner, and of course, the first ever Howard County Pride in Symphony Woods. I'm so glad to have seen so many of you at many of those events. In addition to that, we were able to hold a number, though not as many as we would like, of our free children's events as well as our free all ages events. We're very excited about what 2022 looks like as we are going into 2022 in a position of strength with our many community partners. We're looking forward to substantial community festivals, all at no charge, including a South Asian Music and Dance Festival in the spring, Maker Fair downtown Columbia, which for those of you who have never been, is our downtown Columbia celebration of science, technology, and art, our STEAM festival, Howard County Pride, a brand new Latino music festival, which will be an all-day pan Latino music festival, as well as a Native American heritage event. We have on tap 9, hopefully to be expanded to 12 free children's programs, as well as high quality programs from a world-class symphony who we believe will be back, as well as arts programs that really do reflect the diversity of this community. We will follow up with a written request, but I do hope that the CA board will be able to continue to support the trust in our mission.
Thank you, Nina. Any questions for Nina? Jenny, and then Eric.
Is IAT funding currently budgeted for in the 3 scenarios? And if so, which scenarios?
No, it's not currently included.
It's not in any of the, there's no grant funding in any of the scenarios.
Okay, so the grant funding is currently zeroed out across all 3 scenarios.
Nina, thank you. You're saying free events, a lot of free events. You may have listed close to 20 the last year. But they cost something. They cost the IAT.
Free events cost a lot of money.
Do you
Absolutely.
have any, and it may be different for each event, but do you have any range of what a free event costs your organization?
Absolutely. The smallest free event, and Milton Matthews always used to tell me, stop calling them free events, call them donor-sponsor events instead. And unfortunately, I never really took his advice. I should have. The cheapest free event to hold will cost us for a single individual with very little tech support will cost us a minimum of $500 for a free chrysalis event. The average chrysalis kids event costs roughly $4,500 to $6,000. And that is for a local band, a local children's act. We have some really great ones that we've worked with, including some great Spanish language acts. And that's sort of that all-in price. For that free event, for that investment of $4,500 to $6,000, we will typically get for a kids event, depending on, quite frankly, the swim schedule and the weather and things like that, we will get between 500 and 2,000 people. So for $2 to $3 per child, you're getting a high quality there. For something like an all-day festival, it's roughly for a more of a community, lower intensity festival, minimum of $14,000, goes up to about $65,000.
I'm sorry, 14 to what?
65.
$14,000 to $65,000.
60. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our resident speak out. Thank you to everyone who participated. Okay, on tonight's consent agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from the October 28th Board of Directors meeting and the approval of changes to the Audit Committee charter. Okay, we have no board votes tonight, so next up we will move on to board discussion. First topic is the briefing on the project examining climate vulnerability of Columbia.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Jeremy Sharpenberg. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the Columbia Association. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight as I sort of give a quick overview of the results of this study. The presentation I included in the board packet is fairly extensive, so in order to sort of respect time, I'm gonna go pretty quick through some of these slides. Let me shift here. Okay. So just a little bit on some of the background for the intent of the study. So, our motivation is multifaceted for undertaking this particular project. We're all very aware that the climate is changing. It's changing faster than any of us thought, even 10 years ago. And the Ellicott City floods 2 years apart are sort of the starkest example that we have locally that climate change is real and it's impacting our community right now. The other aspect of this is Columbia Association is a long-term steward of these assets, of our ponds, of our parks, of our pathways, of our facilities. So we need to really hold the long view on how we take care of things. And the execution of this particular study is actually specifically it's called out within our strategic plan to undertake this particular work. So just a little bit of a background on it. So it was underway at the start of the fiscal year, sort of running through late summer into October. It's nearly complete. We're basically just wrapping up the study now. So the intent is to look at what are the hazards that are facing our community, how are they going to impact our assets, and how can we develop some tools to help identify and prioritize next steps. So we focus primarily on increased precipitation and extreme temperatures for the community in terms of those being the primary hazards. We also looked at the potential risk factors associated with communities that may be more adversely impacted by climate change. And then as also included in the work is a little bit of guidance on what some of the next steps should be in terms of mitigation measures. And we really leveraged GIS as a tool in this process for both conducting the analysis and as a way to share the information with the community. So we're basically following what's established by the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit in terms of the steps, the 5 steps to resilience. We're primarily at the first 2 steps in this process, which is basically looking at the hazards and then assessing the vulnerability and risk. So precipitation and flooding was the primary hazard we really looked at. Again, referencing the Ellicott City floods as being a real driver. Me personally, during the first flood, I stood at Lake Kit and saw the statues of Jim Rouse and his brother being, up to their knees in water. So it's real. And this part of the study that we looked at, we created a very unique tool. We developed with our consultant, Michael Baker International, a customized rain on grid model that's unique to Columbia. We didn't use some sort of default map that might be out there. We actually created something very custom for our particular analysis for Columbia. And we focused on, in terms of the hazard aspect for the flooding, based on sort of established projections through the National Climate Assessments and leading researchers in Maryland. We focused on a 30% increase in the total rainfall associated with the 1% rain event. So flooding was kind of our primary driver in terms of a hazard. We also looked at extreme temperature. We were able to identify some maps around sort of vulnerability for extreme temperatures associated with heat islands in the community. The other aspect of the assessment was to look at not only what the hazards are in terms of potential flooding as well as extreme temperatures, but also what are the socially vulnerable populations within our community. And there's some really great information out there, primarily published by the CDC, that really map out how our community sort of, what the sort of hodgepodge of different socioeconomic statuses, household composition, language, accessibility to transportation and housing type. So we were able to leverage this particular map as part of our assessment for climate change vulnerability, looking at hazards associated with precipitation, flooding, and elevated temperatures. So, we are very keenly aware of the unique nature of this particular study. We're kind of on the leading edge of this, frankly, as a community in undertaking this particular work, because we are not what is typically assumed to be a community that's impacted by climate change, because we're not on a coast. We don't have the classical sea level rise threat that Norfolk would have or Miami has, for example. So even undertaking this study was fairly novel, being an inland community, not impacted by sea level rise. And so we're very active engaging with multiple stakeholders throughout the community, largely at Howard County. We interfaced several times with their staff working on the master plan, making sure they were aware of this particular study so that our findings could potentially be rolled into their master plan work. We gave a presentation before the Environmental Sustainability Board for Howard County. We also actively engaged with state experts on Maryland hydrology and also Howard County's Stormwater Management Division. In terms of the aspects that we looked at to undertake our study, we were fortunate that we have a fairly robust data set for GIS coordinates associated with pretty much all the assets that we own and maintain within the community, from tot lots to pools to our pathways. So these are sort of part of the GIS matrix that we were able to overlay with the findings from flooding, as well as the heat maps and the at-risk vulnerable communities. So the way we conducted the assessment was to basically create a matrix where we determined whether a particular asset was going to be impacted by the flood maps that we developed, and whether or not that particular asset served a vulnerable population, served an emergency need, or has historic history of flooding, or is an exterior, sort of an outside facility that is uniquely impacted by extreme temperatures. And so this resulted in a matrix being generated associated with the study to be able to let us know which asset fell within which category. Done. So in terms of the findings, after that quick hit of the background, Columbia is very well positioned from a resiliency standpoint. This is largely driven by the fact that we are a planned community. Things were done in the past in terms of how our community was laid out, where many of the existing stream valleys, the topography of the community was largely maintained. And so as a result, when hazards such as flooding occur, we aren't typically developed in those areas. And the topography of our community is fairly aggressive and that it's fairly hilly. So there are a lot of areas where there's a lot of elevation change, and that helps to reduce the overall impact of flooding. So in terms of the overall assessment, we looked at over 500 different assets in the community. Approximately 4% were found to be at risk of high risk for future flooding, primarily footbridges and playgrounds or tot lots. About 5% were at high risk for extreme temperatures in the community, and 9 were at high risk for both flooding and extreme temperatures. And again, we're just wrapping up the findings of this study. And so one of the key things that we wanted to do in undertaking this particular project was make sure it was accessible to the community, and that there was a way for individuals who are interested in this issue, which is very front of mind for a lot of people, especially with what's happening globally. So a component of the study is a story map. So it'll be a website that's available for residents or any other stakeholder that wants to look at it, that basically tells the story of what we did in this project, what climate change is, what the risks are, and it also enables them to sort of toggle through different interactive GIS-enabled maps where they can drill down into their own community, even find their own home within a map, and see what the findings are in terms of the work that we did. And so this is sort of the result of some of the assessment that we did in terms of the matrix for low, medium, and high risk. As you can see, as to be expected, some of the risks are associated with the Middle Patuxent and Little Patuxent River watersheds, fairly logically, but again, for the most part, very few of our assets were deemed to be at high risk. And also embedded in this particular tool that we'll be making available, you can toggle through the different assets. You can pull up which particular asset you're interested in, whether it's a tot lot or a tennis court or some other type of asset that we own and operate to serve the community. In addition to the story map, we're planning to develop sort of very short little synopsis documents, like a quick 2-page report that details the findings of the study. We're also going to be working closely with the Climate Change and Sustainability Advisory Committee, as well as engaging with the Watershed Committee on engaging the villages in the coming months, basically sort of going village by village to educate and empower our residents on the findings of this study. But it's ultimately good news for us. And again, I think we're blessed to have the foundation as a planned community to help make us more resilient. And then some of the next steps, continuing some of the analysis, doing some refinements, exploring ways we can get this information out into the community and help continue to spread the word about climate change and what our residents can do. Sort of embedding these findings in future planning for tot lots. And can we perhaps shift the location of the next tot lot that we build based on these findings? Are there certain bridges that we should make 6 inches higher or potentially relocate? So our next steps are to basically integrate these findings into our ongoing maintenance and management programs associated with these assets in the communities, in our community.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is that website live now, or is it pending?
It is not live.
Okay.
We are finalizing it now.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Sherry?
And I know I threw a ton at you guys, and I'm happy to take any questions that we have.
And I asked the board to keep them concise because we're close to time.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. I know that this was a really wonderful, very deep project, and it continues to be. And I know that people were engaged in reporting incidents in their neighborhoods and things of that kind about flooding. So I think it's been very grassroots in addition to working with these with the experts around the GIS. One of the things I noticed under assets that you didn't seem to have were CA's lakes. And I remember when we were first talking about Lake Kittamukundi, that there was a question about possible flooding event, and that the walk going around the lake. Is there a separate series of informations or data that's been organized just around the lakes?
It's embedded in the research. I think there were 46 different instances of a pathway being adversely impacted by flooding that we're able to reference now as a decision tool going forward. Mm-hmm. The lakes were more captured specifically associated with the dams as a potential risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ginny?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. I also congratulate you and the committee. Phenomenal job. And I know there'll be a lot more next steps. When you talk about this will guide us in terms of the future location of tot lots, what about the current tot lots? And maybe this is more of a Dennis question, in terms of whether we should spend any money on a current tot lot that's in an area where it's a problem. That's question one. Question two is, what do you say to a resident that's been suffering the loss of property, or perhaps a commercial or private resident, due to stream flooding? That happens to be a stream that was running through CA property, now is running partially through their property, and things like that occurring. I mean, will that be dealt with in any way in terms of a comprehensive plan for stream erosion?
Well, I think it dovetails very well with the ongoing work that John McCoy is doing in terms of implementing our watershed management plan, and also, frankly, provides further justification for stream restoration efforts that really look at some of these worst cases that we have for adverse erosion that may be impacting not only our property, but also residents' property that's adjacent to it.
Thank you.
Lynn?
And I also echo thanks, Jeremy. Just a couple of questions. You talk about nature-based solutions, structure-based solutions. Are there any of those that you are prepared to recommend now? Any pending proposals?
Well, I think from a language perspective, that the nature-based solutions are some of the stream, for example, the stream restorations we're already undertaking. So I think it sort of, again, provides more evidence for the value of that type of work, for really addressing the worst of the erosive situations we have within stream valleys in the community, addressing what the levels are, developing natural floodplains to help mitigate some of that erosion. And then the structural component is in terms of more the built aspect of our pathways and our trails. And I think that's something we're just going to now move forward with, exploring what that means for us as a manager and a maintainer of these properties. Okay, so we have this information. How can we make structural changes in the future to help ensure these facilities are resilient in the face of climate change? So those are sort of our next questions and things to explore.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. This is a lovely presentation, and we look forward to that website being live.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, now we are moving into fiscal year 2023 budget. To start us off, I wanted to take us through a few exercises based on some of the philosophical questions, I think, that we need to determine. Just as a reminder, we have this meeting and we have our December meeting. And after our December meeting, we expect to be providing guidance on building this budget. So we need to at least, start at the kind of top-down, high-level things, make sure we understand where we are. And then, so we're going to try to avoid getting into, I think, Talbot Springs pool should be enough. Just kidding. No,
Locust Park. No.
Right? I was close to it.
I'm teasing.
But, just try to stay out of the details and stay at a high level, because what we're trying to get to is what are the policies and what are the structure that we want staff to go back with to build this budget. So, I think the first and the biggest question is the board's appetite for raising the annual charge. What I'd like to do is just do some sort of this is not even straw vote like that, but just getting a sense of where the board stands. We got Andy's comments via email. He clearly is not in favor. So I'd just like to see a show of hands, and Jess and Ashley. Yeah, so I guess thumbs up, thumbs down. Maybe that is the better way to do it. So if you think, we're going to start at the very highest level. If you think there's any reason to raise the annual charge, give it a thumbs up. Okay, so Sherry, Tina. Yeah, okay. And we have two neutrals. So,
Does Andy go here?
Yeah, and Andy's a down. So, what that says to me is we don't even have a majority to raise the annual charge. So, I'd like to take that off the table. So
move.
We're not moving anything tonight. So don't get carried away. But I think the point is that we want to be sensitive to, that is always an option for, I think it should be reserved for something pretty important. And not to say that outdoor pools aren't important, but I think, what that question takes me back to then is what is it about free outdoor pools that we're trying to accomplish? And do we have, give me a second. I got you though, Sherry and Eric. And Jess. And do we, so let me go back to my notes first, because before we start diving into everybody telling me things. Just
let
give
Janet
me 1 second.
Let's let Janet get a chance to finish, guys.
So we're going to come back to that one. So the annual charge, no, we will. I just wanted, there was one other bigger one that I wanted to do before that. And it was the idea of, I think if you looked at scenarios 1, 2, and 3, we all understand that we're not voting on one of these scenarios. They're just, illustrative for us to be able to understand how they're built.
Right.
But what was interesting was that the reason scenario 1 and 2 ended up the same, essentially, is because the funds brought in from departments and events cover the costs of what's happening in departments and events. So I think that's the next question I'd like to ask is it enough for the board if the group together covers the cost of itself? Of course, then we do have to start talking about the shifts, and we understand that there are trade-offs there. But in general, you look confused, Jane. So I might not be saying this clearly.
That's my listening to you.
Right now, the funding that comes in through memberships, through events, covers the cost of running those facilities and of running those events. And so is it enough for the board to say, yes, we want that to continue, or do you feel like we need to get more detailed about what that looks like. So I'm going to, well, let's do thumbs up, thumbs down again. So if you think it's adequate for, basically facilities.
Can I ask a clarifying
Absolutely,
question?
please.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I'm not, and I want to make sure I'm clear, and I mean, obviously, we're deep in it. But I think one of the key findings that we highlighted last time is that when you break apart the individual program or service, some covered their cost, some lost money. But what we did find when we did all the breaking apart was that community programs and services as a whole, which I think is what, right, department,
yes.
like as a whole, actually covered itself. So, another program helped cover the loss of the Arts Center, right? Does that make sense? Is that what? Because,
That's exactly,
okay,
thank you. That was so much better
what we were trying to highlight was that was one of the questions, was each one on its own. But one finding that certainly we, were encouraged by is that as a nonprofit, obviously we're not charged to truly be profitable in each individual program, but what we did find is that there is a covering of those costs. But I do want to clarify that, well, I guess we need a yes or no, but I would just attach to that if it is, it doesn't need to be individual, it can be department-wide. There's still an element there that means that what we as staff would receive that message is there is a goal to be operating those programs and services more like a business, which, I don't think is exactly the directive we're under right now. So I think that's important to kind of attach to it.
Thank you. Dick, did you have a clarifying question on that specific thing? Okay, hold on. He had his hand up first.
Yeah,
Or is it a question?
No, I think Lakey pretty much covered where I was going with this, but we do have a business model that says that we are going to charge market rate to outsiders, and we're going to give a discount to our residents. And I think that's a good model. And so it doesn't give us a whole, we can't jack up some of the prices. There are things that are nice to have, and we're willing to subsidize them to a little bit and perhaps pull some money from some of the other things to pay for them. The other point that I think is very important is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And one of the real attributes, one of the benefits we have is that we have a big selection of things. And I wouldn't want to cut things out because they cost a little more than they bring in. We have something for everybody. It was mentioned by one of our people spoke earlier. He doesn't necessarily use all of these things, but it's nice to know they're there. And it's also nice to know that our neighbors are getting things that they like too. So there's a lot to be said for having this wide variety, even though not all of them.
Can we get back to that? I mean, so, because I have a list of people who want to talk on the why of the pools. I just want to get what I'm trying to do is quickly nail down. We have an hour to discuss this. I want to quickly nail down. And if you feel like you don't have enough information to say yay or nay, then that's okay too. And then we know, I'm just trying to figure out what we have to work with here.
Did you ask if we had a clarifying question for Lakey? That's what I have. But you asked if we.
Yeah, if there's.
Yeah, okay. Lakey, my question was, we're saying, a department would cover its expenses, et cetera, but does it depend on what expenses we have dedicated to that department? In other words, overhead, interest, or whatever. If it's not in there, then that's one thing. But if we're putting, or even on an individual facility, depending on what we're putting in there, then the cost might be higher. So that's why it gets more complicated. If we remove a few things, I don't know, overhead, reconstruction, whatever, from that, then it's possible that the membership could cover the costs. expenses.
Yes.
So that's my problem as to what, when we're talking about what you just said, what is included in that expense to the facility?
So I think that, thanks for asking, because I think it's a good clarification. And it's your vote, so I'm not sure. But I would put forward that in the scenarios, we have one scenario that was saying, can it cover both its changeable cost and its fixed cost, administrative cost? And then there was another scenario that was, could it cover just the changeable costs? I would say that from the staff side, we definitely are much more comfortable. Again, it's in our nonprofit model, kind of as Dick was just saying, that we have a certain underwriting from the overhead, so to speak, that if you think about it, is really about subsidizing access more than anything. And again, prioritizing kind of resident access. So I guess that might be a two-part then. It's do we want everything to cover its cost as an individual program or department-wide? You know, I would put forward, at least from the staff side, that we would recommend that that question's really only around changeable expense, and that we look at the fixed administrative costs as part of the overhead as operating as a nonprofit. Is that a helpful
Really have to vote on
clarification?
that.
I mean, again, that's the staff recommendation, but obviously the board could, you know, go any way it would like.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarifying question?
Clarifying question. Does this rule, does it cover changeable and/or fixed? Does that apply just to FY23, or does it apply to FY23 plus future budgets?
Just FY23. Every year, the board, we go through this exercise. I mean, we do a 2-year budget cycle normally. This is a little bit different, but every year, the board reassesses.
Okay.
Clarifying question?
Well, I'd like to get to my point, which you introduced at the very beginning.
We're coming back to that. I still have you in the queue for the why. Or is it relevant to this question?
Well, it's relevant to the whole discussion here, I think, which is at the high level in terms of future needs. What I see in terms of trends, we've got capital costs going up, we've got salaries going up, we've got repairs and maintenance costs going up, and we've got future contingencies, since we just heard from Jeremy about that, which indicates higher costs. So what I'm really concerned about is not getting into a crisis situation. When I've done, you know, when you try to strategize, you want to have stuff front-loaded rather than get caught in a crisis. And we've just been through COVID, and everybody, we're not the only folks who have been through this kind of crisis. But I think it's been a great learning. So while I am not in favor of raising to the degree that is in scenario 3 for that purpose of making pools free, I think some consideration to a phased increase over time, even 1 or 2 cents over with a cap of 2 years, would give us a better idea of what we would actually need in this post-COVID period. And just to be clear about this, I was talking to somebody, the cost of wood, the cost of nails, the cost, the supply chain, we are as subject to that as any other business. So that's the kind of thing that it's our values, yes, but it's also the real world that we're living in. So I'm concerned about that.
And thank you. And so we can shift a little bit here, because that's what I'm hearing. And you actually address one of my other questions that I planned on posing is, how do we invest in our future? And what, I think that was where I landed with pools, for instance, is that, well, that's really nice. It's a lovely asset to have, and I'm sure people would enjoy them. But how does that create the basis for moving forward and for the future? And so I was looking at this and thinking about it in the sense of how do we invest in our future and what is it that we want to see as a part of that investment. So, so with that in mind, we can go back to the why of the pools. We'll revisit any high-level questions. But Sherry, was that primarily what you wanted to say in response? Like, it wasn't specific to the pools. It was about raising the assessment for a good purpose.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do have a comment about the pools, but I'll get to that later.
Okay, well, we're moving into that, and you were top of the queue.
Oh,
but you
okay,
did just,
then I'll move into it.
So you have 60 seconds left.
Okay. I see the pools, the neighborhood pools, the community pools, as being the key asset of Columbia. They operate not just as a nice to have, but they operate as a key place where people meet, where friendships are formed, where kids join together in swim teams. It is a nexus. It's like the schools. It is a nexus for the community. And walkable pools are so liberating compared to having to necessarily drive to a pool. I don't think all the pools have to be treated in the same way. And that's another thing that we've kicked around for years. Is there some way of creating distinguishing characteristics of pools that would make them attractive to a broader number of people? I think there's...
Sherry, you're at your 3 minutes.
Okay, one more sentence. I think there is a way of increasing participation without having to overstaff. So before we choose to get rid of anything, I think we have to try something different.
Eric?
Yeah, so when I first looked at scenario 3, and we're talking about free pools, I think I wasn't obviously here when the scenario was designed, but I think the reason why that scenario was designed is something bigger. I think the real question is, are we getting good value for our annual charge? Are we getting good value for the fees that we're paying to CA? And I think one of the reasons why people sort of gravitate towards the idea of including the free pools in their annual charge is to make people feel like, okay, you're actually getting a better value. If you compare CA versus River Hill versus Maple Lawn, for example, the annual charge that people pay in River Hill is significantly more than the fees that someone would pay in Maple Lawn. Yet Maple Lawn, their fees include the pools, and CA they don't include the pools. So I think the idea is trying to create better value for the annual charge. I notice a lot of the questions are focusing on raising revenue, but one of the questions I have is, can we make things more efficient? Can we operate the pools with the same value, but less expensively? And that's not just the pools, but across all the departments. Can we make CA more efficient?
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, so when we first started talking about these scenarios, I believe that I was the one that actually requested the free pool scenario to be put together. And that was because I have heard from many people a couple things: the value trade-off that Eric just mentioned, and the something about equity of access, right? Because everybody's paying into, and then, you know, we've had multiple conversations and we started talking about this, about what should everybody be paying for, right? What are the things that are important enough for everyone to pay for? And it seemed to sort of come down to open space in pools. And so, you know, if everybody, since pools don't make money, if everybody's paying for the pools, at least that's how in my mind it was, then everybody should have access to the pools. Now, the thought being, what I think was really useful about the exercise of doing this is that it really illustrated the trade-offs of what that would actually look like and how that would actually impact all of CA's operations. And after seeing that, I mean, I certainly agree with everybody else that it doesn't make sense right now. However, I do think that we need to find a way to make the pools more accessible to people who either can't afford the full pool membership or don't see the value in that. And I mean, I certainly have ideas about that, but I don't like the Columbia card set up. I don't like the fact, I feel like there's got to be a better way. Maybe there's a couple different pools have reduced rates or something, lower utilized pools, something like that. But that was the intent in that, was to make it more equitable to all residents of Columbia. Obviously, recognizing now that it would have such a significant impact on CA's operations as a whole, it's not something we want to jump into lightly. But I still care about the issue of how can we make it easier for people to access pools.
Thanks, Jess. And I think that hits it on the head, and that's exactly what we need to focus on, is making sure that we are thinking about what we value and how, being open to other ways of doing things. So, Ashley, you're up.
Great. Yeah, so Jess actually led me into this in a great way. Obviously, it's really clear that making pools free to those that are paying the CA assessment isn't really going to be feasible, at least not for us to do this season. But it's in the spirit of what our organization would support, right? So I was wondering if it's possible. I don't know how difficult of an exercise it would be for the staff, but what would the possibility be for us to offer a set number of pool passes per CA assessed property, right? Because then we can offer non-member residents a way to have access. It's not limiting based on income. They're not limited based on second Sundays, things like that. We're removing barriers for them to fall within the income qualified guidelines. They don't have to supply a tax transcript from the IRS, which is a difficulty in and of itself. It gives us the opportunity to engage with residents that aren't members. And then there wouldn't be, and then also resident members would have the added benefit of receiving additional guest passes, right? Because I know there's always that question for members of well, I'm paying for this, why am I not getting something for it as well? So they could also have access to it as well if we were giving guest passes to everybody that's paying the CA assessment. That was my suggestion.
Thank you. Lakey, did you want to respond to that?
Yes. Or I guess, well, I don't want to mess up your system if I shouldn't ask a question, but what I would like to ask is whether we can get consensus that the board is in agreement that we are not trying to move forward making outdoor pools free access. So that's part one. Then part two would be, I would like to, if there's agreement that that is not what the board wants to do as a whole, then any other ideas? I mean, we heard some in the intro, we've received some from citizens, we've received details from the Aquatics Committee. Any ideas that board members have, a few have already mentioned. I think that is something that staff can then say, here's a package of ways, if there's agreement, not the free outdoor pools, and there's agreement that the goal is increasing access or equity of access. But that's a question.
No, and actually, and I was going to suggest, I think we're thinking along the same lines, and that is, we as a board to say, hey, we agree that these are important things, and we'd like staff to take a stab at coming up with some options or, a suggestion for how can we, have, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to suggest what the options are, because I think part of this exercise is, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and then allow the staff to think about possible ways that could happen based on what they know about all of the operations that we don't know. I'll put you in the queue, Eric. Tina, you're up.
Timing myself as I'm like,
I'll time you.
I'm looking 6 ways at one time.
Judy,
I'm glad that we appear to be coming to this consensus. I wanted to draw kind of an oblique reference to our history. when Rouse was building Columbia, it was in the middle of the civil rights era, and towns were paving over their pools wholesale rather than integrate them. I have done some research, and the two cities that people are always like, oh my God, they have so many pools, are Cleveland, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio. And per 100,000 people, which is how many people there are in Columbia roughly, they are astonishing at 11 and 12 pools per 100,000 people apiece. If Columbia were a city, we would be more than double that. And I think that Jim Rouse did that on purpose. And that's part of why I was so thrilled when Jess suggested that let's talk about free pools. I think it's an important conversation that we had. I think that it's an important exercise that the staff went through to do the math and to do the figuring and to do the thinking. And I think that our what looks like our conclusive direction about how do we think of more and more ways to make those pools much more equitably accessible to more and more people is exactly the right one, and I'm so glad we're doing this. I also wanted to know that the $10 million capital budget for each of those scenarios is insufficient. We have, from what I can tell walking around the community, we have deferred maintenance, we have an inability to make significant repairs, we have an insufficient amount of resources to do a number of the things that we need to do structurally. All of the environmental concerns that we have nothing. $10 million is not enough. And so I will ask the board to consider, we have significant, and that's why I gave a thumbs up to raising the assessment, because right now we can't ask staff to take pay cuts in this environment. Efficiency is going to be challenging and important to consider, and there's no way we can continue to do more and more with less and less. So that's why I gave a thumbs up to raising the annual charge.
Dick, you're up.
Yes. Sherry raised an interesting point, and that is, how could we make the pools more attractive?
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked earlier about swimming lessons, and there was a reason for that. One of the things I discovered when I was a counselor at a boys club camp back when I was in college is that so many kids from low-income families can't swim. And I saw it again in Marine Corps boot camp. We had lots of recruits from small towns in the Deep South and in Appalachia, and they couldn't swim, which is kind of tough when you're an amphibious force. And what happened at Parris Island is that they have a very active swimming program to teach these kids to swim, or these guys to swim, before they could even get out of Parris Island, which is certainly an incentive to learn to swim. But it seems to me that if we found ways to extend swimming lessons to, it really pays off in the long run. I mean, even a family that has a really tight budget, buying that play membership is a luxury item, unless you've got kids who are really enthusiastic about swimming and using those pools. And it kind of reminds me of the story about you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish, you can sell him tackle. And that's, to me, kind of a way to improve the value of the pools, is to find ways to get that teaching thing out there. And I would think we'd be able to find partners for it. I would think the county.
You just hit on my next buzzword.
Yeah, I would think this would be a thing where we're not competing with the county, and where we could get recreation and parks on board and get some help there. There are organizations, I learned to swim is through the American Red Cross. And maybe there are other organizations out there that would be interested in getting involved in a program like this. So, yeah, I see this as a way of enhancing value and marketing interest.
Thank you. Ginny?
Yeah, okay. When we talk about free swim lessons, you're absolutely right in terms of partnerships. The police department, before all this COVID started, were giving free swim lessons at Talbot Springs to kids that were interested, plus they then work with the kids. So it's there, the opportunity's there. I think the staff have talked about, and the board has talked about a lot of things they want explored, and I think that's the way to go. And I think you've already made some changes in terms of income qualified and reaching out, et cetera. I congratulate the staff on doing that. I think you're adding 2 more Title I schools, et cetera. So what is the real issue here? For me, it's not just saying, let's zero in on pools being free. That is not what we're really talking about. What I think we're talking about is CA has an income qualified program that costs, Susan's going to correct me in a minute, but close to $1 million a year. Maybe I'm off a couple of pennies or so. The county has Parks and Recreation scholarships, and they offer that to people. Our people pay taxes to the county, yet they also pay lien and annual charge for CA to do something, and we get no subsidy from the county to help us with our income qualified. Why don't we get help there from the county or have them have scholarships run through Parks and Rec, but they can use CA facilities? 2, we keep talking about pools. Not every village has a pool. Town Center, you're lucky you have no pools. What is that about? If pools were supposed to be, there for the beginning of Columbia, et cetera, what happened to Town Center? River Hill only has 1, and Dorsey Search only has 1, so let's drop it there. The thing that I'm saying is it's more than pools. People that are income qualified or need help, maybe some of them could care less about the pools. In fact, I know that to be a fact. That's why we have problem with the attendance. They would rather play golf. They would rather do tennis. They would rather play soccer. We need to look at how we continue to spread the word about income qualified. That is our real decision tonight on this budget. Do we or do we not support individuals that are in need to use all of our facilities? Let's not keep talking about just the pools for income qualified or free. All of our facilities, because some people don't want to use the pools. They really would prefer other facilities, whether it's a child or an adult. That is true, and it's not going to change. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have Eric, then me, then Lynn.
Yeah, so I think, I agree that I think having included pools, I think use the word free, I'll use the word included from now on. I think that's a great idea, and I think it's something we should work towards. I think the main structural issue that we're facing is that the pools are wrapped up into the rest of the sports, the fitness clubs, like all this money forms like this knot that you pull one out and all this stuff has to be covered. So what I would propose is creating, if pools really are the main issue, creating a membership, a resident membership that's, okay, pools only, one fee for the entire season, and can we create that fee so it'd be revenue neutral? So a revenue neutral resident pool membership, that would be good for the entire season. And then from there, if that works out, then we can adjust that fee up and down, and we could set up either income qualified versions of the fee or figure out how to make that fee drop to 0 altogether for everyone. But I think the first step is if pools are really going to be the focus, we need to really pull that out of this structure and set up a membership that's just pools.
So I would like to ask board members to not get into detailed suggestions. If you have them, feel free to email them to Dan, because...
Look forward to them all.
Yeah, right. Because that's part of the solution, right? We're talking about what's the problem we're trying to solve, not the solution for the problem we're trying to solve. So let's try to keep it up here with the what is the problem we're trying to solve. Okay, so I'm up next. So I think... Well, actually, at least 3 people during residents speak out, and then Dick just said it, but partnerships is something that, comes up a lot. And I think we have a huge opportunity for partnering with, across the board, like for multicultural, for, parks and rec kind of things, for a lot of different things. I think the organization right now, though, is not really positioned to take advantage of a lot of that because it requires resources. So I think, part of that is we may want to consider funding partnerships support. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's hiring a person. I don't know if that's co-sponsoring events. I think it could be any of those things. But I'd like us to think about, how do we expand our reach? Like this board has, for those of you who are newer, this board has discussed previously the idea of trying to expand CA's reach. And one of the most efficient ways that we can do that is by finding partners that have the same goal in whatever area. And so if we can come up with, a direction for that, I think, we can add more value for our residents without it being, we will have to invest in it. This comes back to my whole idea of investment in our future. But I think that investment would pay off every year more and more as we create these partnerships in the community across different organizations. And then my second thing, still kind of going with this investment, I kind of agree with you, Tina, on the capital expenditures. Having seen in Long Reach what happens after years of neglect and then it becomes so expensive as to be prohibitive, I think that is true. And then the second piece of that is the part of, CA ensuring that our assets are visible and, obvious to the community in terms of that they're there, that they can be used, and that we support them. So I think, nowhere is that probably more important than at the lakefront with all of the development that's going on in town center and around there. Years ago, I was outvoted trying to get design funding for the lakefront. And so I think that's, it's time to revisit that idea. There's a lot going on down there, and we don't want to be reactionary. We want to be part of the conversation. And so I'd also like to see us talk about, what our plans and thoughts are for creating that kind of investment. And, I think it's a branding opportunity too. Like I think Danica and Tim have done like a phenomenal job with the branding and marketing. I think, take that one step further, and it's investment in the things out in the community. So that's it for me. Lynn.
Yeah. I think a lot of these comments have been very interesting, very helpful. I especially like Ginny's take on, and I absolutely agree with it. This isn't just about pools for people. There are so many of our residents who really don't know about pools. They don't swim. They don't take part in those kinds of activities. Society has changed. Columbia has changed. We're very different from we were 50 years ago when Jim Rouse had a pool in every neighborhood. Right now, you have working parents. I personally go to Running Brook and Faulkner Ridge, two of the least big pools, two of the least used pools, in Columbia. And there is room for lots more people, but they don't come. We're surrounded by apartments. And again, I don't think that it is solely lack of money or people not being able to afford it. I think their interests are other places. To bring when my kids were little and I brought them up here in Columbia, I went to the pool with them every day. But I could. I got them swimming lessons. I took care of them. So many working parents today, especially the lower income, can't afford to do that. So I think it would be great to be able to take this a level higher. What can we do? What other activities can we do in addition to pools that would include, more of our residents? Again, it's about access, but also recognizing that we are different. We are not the totally black-white community that we were in 1968, 1970. We've broadened, we've changed, and we have a lot we can do with that.
Thank you. That's all I had on my list. Does anyone else? Yeah, Leaky.
I had a, if we can do thumbs up or thumbs down. I guess my question, and it's obviously super important for us to parse out during the budget session. So I'm hearing both increased access, but then I'm hearing a very distinct equitable access, particularly potentially around income qualified, right? So I just want to be clear, because those are completely different strategies in terms of, are we just trying to get numbers up right at the pools, or are we trying to actually increase access for people that, whether it's income qualified or just perceived access, don't feel welcome? There's kind of a lot of layers to what might be around equity. I just want to be super clear that that's the target, and is that the support target? And then to Jenny and Lynn's point, is it just pools, or, outdoor pools, or is it kind of across all CA facilities? That would be really helpful for us to understand.
Ask them one at a time with our thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just, but it might be a both and. So Sherry, and then we're going to try to distill this into something we can actually do thumbs up or thumbs down on.
Yeah, I think, you bring up a very, very interesting point. And what I think has happened is over time, there has been a shift, and then I think that's what I'm hearing Lynn, talk about also, that the middle, if you think of the bell curve, the middle has shifted. So it's not just income, and it's we're seeing shifts in schedules, we're seeing shifts in responsibilities, but somehow we are not hitting the median of our residents any longer. And I think, at least my reading of Rouse is that was really, really important to Jim Rouse, that was about the cohesiveness of a community, that was about bringing the great middle together in places that were going to be appropriate for what people wanted. So, that's going really broad, but I think that that's a very good point, and it certainly speaks to the facilities in general. When we've got structures that are not hitting what many seniors or singles, millennials need, that's not about income, that's about where people are in their lives. So are we meeting the needs of people in their lives, and how can we encourage them to be participants in our community? And maybe we have to shift.
Thank you, Sherry. I think that's an excellent point, because you sort of described how I'm thinking about it. So why don't we do this? Is that enough direction, though, like shifting the middle? That's pretty broad.
Not really.
Yeah, okay.
Though I completely agree with you. So I get, and you said this at the beginning, and, we're all moving through this new process together, but we have one more meeting on December 9th. And, at the end of that meeting, staff will need to know everything you want us to know to grind over the winter holidays for about 6 weeks. So I guess I would ask, well, do you want me to ask you to ask the group?
We have one more comment before we get to a question. Can we go?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Ashley, why don't you give your comment, and then we're going to.
Great. Thanks. Sorry. I wanted to comment. So CA did the millennial report that came out, I guess it was 3 years ago now. And they did ask the question, why those who previously had a CA membership left, and what is the primary reason you are not a CA member, right? So that's two different sections, one prior members and one you're just not a member. And the number one answer for both of those was too expensive, right? So cost is definitely a huge factor here. 47% it was too expensive for those that have previous left, and 40% said it was too expensive for the primary reason that they were not a member. So it may not be that they qualify for the low income qualified portion, right? Like, sure, there are plenty of millennial age folks that wouldn't qualify on that end, but there are plenty that they just can't afford it amongst all of the other bills that are coming in line with rent or mortgage and student loans and daycare and all of that other stuff.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yep.
So I think that brings up, and it's almost like you're reading the report, Ashley. I assume you're looking
Yeah, we're going to save 10
or did
minutes.
she like know that off the top of her head? But so I guess the key question is, because now I want to be clear, at least what I think I'm hearing is we're swinging away from being more like a business model and covering cost plus, and we're actually saying we want to increase access in an equitable way and define that equity in a variety of ways, which likely will mean a reduction in fees and more underwriting, even if it's not in a more formal program. So is there consensus around that concept? Because I have to attach those. I mean, I don't think we can cover all our costs and broaden access. There's an interim step there, which price is a big driver of. I think that's just a reality. Doesn't mean that it would stay permanently. Does that make sense? I can't quite tell. Okay.
Do you mean all costs, or are there certain costs you wouldn't be covering? When somebody says.
So again, I think it's changeable costs.
I think it's very.
Yeah. Changeable.
Dick?
Well, you can't decrease the cost of the programs without finding the money somewhere.
Exactly.
And there's been some support for increasing the annual charge, which I think would be a terrible mistake. We're in a situation right now because of the things we've gone through, where we're actually offering less than we used to. That's a bad time to charge more when you're offering less. And again, I just see enormous resistance to an increase in the annual charge. And it would be terrible PR for us.
I think we're not going back there, Dick. That's not what we're saying.
But I'm just saying,
that's
if you're
not what
going
I
to
heard.
lower the
I think-
costs, where's the money going to come from?
Well, it could come from other programs.
Well, and I do want to say that the other alternative here is that we could get feedback on, let's target in the next fiscal year what you very specifically want to increase access around. What does equitable access mean? Let's define that. And instead of it being everybody, let's get some target groups. We will pick up other people along the way. And I think that as we start to make those pivots, we'll probably learn more, to your point, about what other groups might also benefit from. That could be an option.
So we're going to do a thumbs up here because we're running out of time on this one. We do want, Lakey's going to present some of the results from the survey in the last 10 minutes of this conversation, so I want to save time for that. But I'm going to phrase this in a little bit broader way, but I think it's narrower than the original one. So I think what I'm hearing is increased access for income qualified. But in addition to that, easier access. So, and I'm not sure that that's just like, are there options for other types of access that broadens access without undermining funding?
Yes, I think the answer is yes.
Okay, so that's what the question I'd like to pose. Is there anyone who's thumbs down on that? Eric is thumbs down.
I need to clarify.
Okay, hold on. Let's take a vote and then you can clarify. Ashley and Jess, are you thumbs up or thumbs down? Ashley's thumbs up. I'm assuming Jess is because she put that in the chat. And Dick, do you have any opinion?
That sounds reasonable.
Okay. Eric, did you?
So I like the idea in theory, but to clarify, I think we were talking the other day that our memberships, we only have like 20-25% that are members. I think CA needs to work for everyone, not just specific groups here or specific groups there. I think we, as a board, we need to focus on encouraging everyone to enjoy all of the CA facilities, because that's what CA is all about, is getting the entire community, all of CA, to enjoy, whether it's the pools or the golf courses or the tennis courts. And we shouldn't be focusing on a particular demographic here, particular demographic there. We need to focus on the entire community.
I think that's what I meant by increasing access on on a broader basis, so that there are options if you can't or don't want to be a member. But Dick.
Yeah, one of the things we haven't even mentioned in terms of participation is we have all those pathways. We have 3 lakes. We have incredible open space. And so we have a lot more people participating in Columbia than just in our programs. So, let's take that into consideration. And then there's just the entire gestalt. I mean, you live in Columbia, and it's a wonderful place. It's a beautiful place. It's a friendly place. That's worth something too. I mean, so I wouldn't say we are only taking care of 25% of our population.
Okay, we're cutting this off.
Sorry.
We're not going back and forth on this. So, I mean, you're outvoted, Eric. So we understand. I mean, thank you for stating your thoughts on it. And I think we all want to think broader, but it's incremental steps, right? Like, we can't do it all in 1 year, too. Even our approach to the budget has been different from any other year, and that, so it's incremental steps. And so let's start laying the foundation for how we move this forward and how we create a budget process that we can adjust in a reasonable way that allows us to continue to build for the future.
And do we have a no on outdoor pools being included or free? Is that a consensus?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And then did we get a final on, can it be department-wide that is covering changeable cost, or is there a desire for that to be an individual level program? Did we get that answer?
We did not get that answer.
Want to move something and we'll vote?
You don't have to vote. We're not voting. We're just, this is all guidance. This is not voting.
Thumbs up on it being department? I mean, is it?
Yeah, so this is, okay, so the idea being they cover changeable costs.
Yes.
That's what we're going to look at. Who is thumbs up on?
You have a clarification, Dan?
Yeah, I just would like to understand how, if we're moving to increasing access, equitable access or not, or all, that kind of dramatically will impact, and how big of a step it is, will impact the finances. And so that will impact the ability to cover the changeable cost. So there is going to be a give and take there, that kind of what we have modeled out in the scenarios may not hold true and may not be the same result as we try to achieve the goals that set forth. So what I'm trying to say is they could be oppositional goals.
Yes.
And I think Lakey mentioned that when she was speaking earlier.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Sherry?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that's a good point, and I think the suggestion that the goal setting be realistic, so that nothing is 100%. This is like turning the Titanic. I mean, it's an incremental, slow process, and with this budget, we have 2 years to begin a process in setting concrete and measurable goals, let's say in particular programs. And that would allow us to see how things are moving over time. So, I don't envision this as being a sudden change. But I think the way you bring about plan change is incrementally, by setting out those small steps and then actually seeing whether you've made those steps happen.
And as we always discuss the trade-offs, we need to understand them, and we need to decide what is trading.
So could we just add to this that is as the goal, but that it's not to have a negative impact on increasing membership, which would have another, would decrease the number of members. But that would be the goal. So it doesn't hold you to, it has to achieve it.
So I think the staff recommendation, just to enter that into the conversation, would be that if the goal is put in front of us to increase equitable access, particularly around income qualified, and at the same time broaden and ease access for a wider group of people, which would be everybody in Columbia, which is less about Program B and more, frankly, about a lot of communication and branding and kind of those pieces. I think the staff recommendation would be that if that is the priority goal, then we need to keep the wiggle room that you are not also charging us simultaneously to cover all costs in a more for-profit traditional model. I would say that trying to do that in a single budget year, to your point, kind of let us get started, get some data, understand the impact, that would be what the staff recommendation would be.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that's more flexible, which is what I was trying to say.
Do you see an option for projecting, like for understanding? Because I think the key is to do it in a vacuum of 1 year makes it really challenging to understand where we're headed. And so I know projections are not easy either. So,
I think that we have a reality that, if we could get that guidance by the time, we're in our December meeting, that we can have some, general forecast of, some impacts of what we think that looks like, because in order to draft the budget, we'll have to do that. But I think that in order for us to be able to, frankly, grind that budget out at that speed, it's really going to take, because again, we've got to fold in the whole minimum wage, and we'll know in December whether that passed or not. In order to do that effectively, I think reserving this piece as flexible so that when we come back to you in January with the draft budget, we have addressed that internally. Does that make sense? I mean, that would be.
All right, you guys get 60 seconds each because we're out of time.
I'll make it less than that.
Okay.
I think we can actually skip ahead. I think what you outlined is pretty much where the board's coming from. And so let's not wait till December 9th. I think you've got some direction there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I just want to point out that looking at the scenario 2, it looks like there's a $2.1 million to play around with. So that's something to already leverage.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Can I, before we, can I get a thumbs up, thumbs down on the partnerships piece, though? Because I think that's a pretty important, I mean, whether we include it or not. So what I'm asking for is additional budget to support partnerships, and that could be co-sponsoring events, that could be hiring somebody to engage in the community, et
So
cetera.
it shows up as a line item. It's somewhere, somehow. That's what you're saying?
I mean, I think, because I don't think the community and events budget is big enough to, so, I mean, I think that's, because normally that's where I would sort of envision it, but I think either that has to be beefed up or it has to be carved out separately, but.
I think Lakey makes a good point about making it a line item.
Yes.
So that it can be tracked and so that you can see an effect over time.
Yeah.
Would that be the community engagement person's responsibility? And
do we have a community engagement?
Well, isn't that in the budget?
It is, that position, but I think what you're saying is different, which is, from what you were saying earlier, I got the impression it was more that in order to, have a program with another entity, everything in my experience says we've got to have some kind of skin in the game. And so in some cases that might be the facility, right? Or it might be staff, but in other cases it might be funding. So that's why I was clarifying if it's a line item where it feels like we're going to use that money in that way.
So if it's a line item, does that make it?
Not a person, a line item. For
right, it wouldn't be a person.
Oh, okay.
Or would, I mean.
Okay, then.
Could it? I guess.
Getting into detail.
I was going to say, I think we can come back with that.
I agree. Okay.
I just want it to be clearly delineated. Maybe that's.
If it's what you're talking about, that's good. One other thing, I think we're going to give the staff credit. A lot of partnerships are going on. I just put through in the police because that's one that isn't going on, but a lot of going on, and you've got advisory committees galore that could help us and are helping us establish partnerships.
Yes.
We just got to keep working these to the extent we can. We got the IAT that does.
Let's put our money where our mouth is then and say it's important. That's all I'm suggesting.
If it's a line item in the budget, yeah, I agree. I thought it was going to be another person, and I didn't want to, you get somebody stepping on everybody else's toes when these are the experts that know what a partner would be and how to achieve it, and you don't mess around with another department, et cetera.
Okay.
It's different.
You already had your 60 seconds, didn't you? We're over time, and Lakey still has a presentation to do.
Go ahead.
All right, this is what I will say, though. Track your comments, because obviously, we need to continue this conversation, and I don't know that December board meeting is enough. And so let's continue the conversation. I don't know if we try to set up like a discussion just among us simply to, I think that has to be public, but something to discuss. But, maybe we need to add an hour somewhere where we can, continue the conversation, because I don't want to stymie conversation, but I do want to keep us on track.
Okay, I'll make this quick. If you'll take one of those and pass it, and one of those and pass it. This is a separate sheet. Take one of those and pass it. This is a separate sheet, one of those and pass it. Okay, so what this is, and I'll make this quick, we just wanted to be able to report back to the board. It's two different memos that summarize the online survey results, as well as our community session that we held around just the budget. So first and foremost, the biggest news to share is that we had over 450 survey responses. Okay, really? I was super excited about that. While not statistically significant for Columbia, I think particularly around a topic like the budget, I think it really does show that we used a lot of different venues to get the word out. Obviously, the board members were highly engaged in that as well. So thank you for that. I assume everybody has seen the survey, but just real quickly, it was a combination of ranking, literally, 1 to 10, and then going through the exercise of must, should, and nice to do. So what you'll quickly see is that overall, when we asked about kind of the big areas that CA covers, we put 5 forward, and we asked them to put them in order of importance. So community programs was first, then community operations, then capital improvements, village associations, and then communications and marketing. And then kind of running through the paragraphs, the big takeaway is that when we did individual rankings on a scale of 1 to 10, outdoor pools received the highest average of 9. Then it was green space and parks, swim center and pathways were ranked 8. The lowest rankings were Columbia Arts Center, golf, international exchange and multicultural, and the archives. Then we move into must, should, nice to do. On the must, the biggest number of respondents said outdoor pools and pathways. A large number said green space and parks. About half said tot lots and play, and then 40% said sustainability and watershed for must. Then we move to should do. About half said youth and teen center, ice rink, and sports park, skate park. Also, about 40% said camps and school-age services should be done by CA. And then on the second page, you'll see the nice to do, which most people put the international exchange and multicultural and the archives in. Golf was also nice to do, as well as the Arts Center and community events and programs. We then asked open-ended, an opportunity for people to submit comments or open-ended, and we started to see themes there that pretty much match up with the ranking in the must, should, nice to do. A lot of that is also captured in the summary, but I think that you'll see kind of the bullet points that the takeaways, aquatics facilities, open space, and pathways were highly valued. Community programs and services and community operations were a must. And then I think that one other thing we got a lot of positive feedback about was the ability to participate online. So a lot of people wrote that in their comments. And so then the second memo You'll see that we had 75 people register for the budget session, but we were just at 40, kind of at the height, people kind of go in and out. But the recording is on the YouTube page, and people have been viewing it. We received 42 questions through the meeting, and you'll see on the second page the word cloud that communications put together. I would say that a lot of that conversation revolved around the annual charge and the general feeling not to raise it, and a lot of discussion about the outdoor pools. I will say that in general, and we interacted, Danica Rhines did a great job at moderating and kind of managing, and it was myself and Susan and Dan and Dennis answering questions. And I would say we had some very thoughtful questions. I think we had some pretty insightful questions. And we got generally good feedback about doing the session and offering it. And again, it's recorded for viewing. So just wanted to kind of report out on that and make sure everybody had that information.
We are out of time.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakey. All right. Moving on to our next topic, we have our update on the President CEO goals and objectives. And while Lakey's pulling this up, I was going to say, please remember to submit your mid-year evaluation before November 15th.
Okay, so I was going to kind of leverage the format that I did in June. Well, let me go back, start at the beginning. With my goals and objectives and kind of report out, obviously, to the board, but also to the community as a whole. I do want to make sure to mention, because I don't believe we did it at the top, I'm not sure, but today is Veterans Day, and I do want to recognize everyone and thank everyone for their service. I have multi-generational military service in my family, and certainly understand the service and sacrifice, and I'm grateful for that, and feel like civic engagement, just like this board meeting this evening, is actually a responsibility and really something that everyone should find a way to engage in. So, okay. In reporting out, I want to be very clear that everything I'm reporting is a team effort. There is no way that, even though I am the only employee of the board, that I could move these things or have this level of engagement and, direction of success without the team at multiple levels across CA, and I think that's very important to recognize. So in stewardship of resources, what I wanted to highlight, we have had a positive bottom line for both first quarter. Second quarter, we're starting the preparation of that report now. So it is not final. You have not received it, but that's where our early indicators are. We have used, this was touched on earlier in one of the comments, we have really been pushing getting a lot more creative and adapting our strategies around supply chain and hiring. So that is something that nationally everyone is experiencing, and we've got to kind of define our own solutions. I think around supply chain, what we have seen is, we're expanding our vendor pool. We're considering, renting versus owning, and repair versus, purchase. But we've gotten a few creative ideas, and Sherry, I think it was you earlier that mentioned lumber, but we have a fiberglass polymer that we're using for our bridge replacement, and it got to the point where they wouldn't even quote us a price. You had to place an order, which was obviously not going to be very feasible for us to be able to budget. So our purchasing manager worked on, tying it to CPI so that we were able to actually get a contract that we had some certainty in. So again, I think we've got some good minds around that, and we've been doing a lot more outreach around vendor diversification. In hiring challenges, this is something that I think there's been increased collaboration with our HR team and our groups that are actively hiring. I think that we have gotten, again, a bit more creative in where we're going and where we're showing up. For instance, we did a All Jobs at CA Day at Howard Community College as a cooperation. We are going to, I've started the conversations with high school principals. A couple of them are going to let us come in during lunchtime to talk directly to high school students about not just lifeguards, but all jobs at CA that they would be eligible for age. So those are things that we're really trying to get more creative about. We have done the sign-on bonus. Obviously, we started that during the lifeguard season. We've continued it with school-age service. And we do tie that to an additional bonus for retention, right? So there's a sign-on, but then there's, if you stay, complete the season, complete the year. So I think that the teams are really getting a lot more collaborative, and even as we've done our realignment, I think there's a lot more cross-information about strategy that's happening, which seems to be getting us some good results. As you all know, we are in a new budget process, so, we are doing the test cases, and we've done a lot of pull apart, and our line items have changed. We've done more engagement, just as the surveys I mentioned. But a lot of that communication and outreach has been also through village managers, the village board chairs, our advisory committees. I think we're certainly trying to get a lot more engaged there with people that already have raised their hand and said, yes, I want to participate more in CA. And I think, even the discussion here tonight, I think that some of these exercises have eliminated the trade-offs, which obviously was really the goal. In realigning, I do want to say community operations, community programs, and services. In a lot of ways, community operations was really just kind of trying to clarify all the things that were happening in what was only called open space. And there's a lot more that is happening in that group, and I think that making sure we made some movement with staff there, as well as kind of claiming some of the things that they were already doing, but making sure that we're getting closer to line items in the realigned budget to make sure they're being resourced instead of kind of pulling from other places. I do believe that the way these groups are organized is easier to understand. It feels a bit more intuitive to our community, and I think that better visibility, frankly, is increasing our accountability, but also our ability to share resources and, again, collaborate. We initiated, as a reminder, based on the board resolution that had passed, we did bring back, the ability to open 2 pools. We were only able to open 1, but it was a Herculean effort nonetheless. So certainly want to give a nod to that. And then, the time and energy spent towards negotiating the ongoing litigation to settlement. So relevance is a key partner. This is obviously a place that I have personally spent a lot of time in my role. So Janet Loughran, who, helps me markedly be successful, keeps track of all of these things, and so it's really great, and it's going to be a great kind of record to have. I am at 98 meetings with community stakeholders. I was like, really? Like I couldn't have gotten 2 more in? So when I presented, I was at 100. But over 30 community events, whether that's attended, in many cases made remarks. I've now done 2 keynotes for Community Action Council and then Howard County Chamber of Commerce. I do want to highlight that with the community stakeholders, a lot of those are frankly new connections, and in some cases reconnections that have not been kind of activated in at least the way I'm being told, many years or in some cases decades. So I have found, in general, an eagerness to understand CA today, and really the opportunity to kind of redefine, and kind of back to your comments about partnerships that are possible. Definitely more engagement directly with village leadership. We have tried to be a lot more diligent. That's part of the realignment that we've done. Dennis has done a lot on site with doing tours and really being hands-on with the village managers. But just our communication, the village manager meeting. I'm doing also outreach to the board chairs, frankly, at their request, as I have gone around to now 7 of the 10 village board meetings. So by January, it should be all 10. But as I'm doing that, I'm getting some distinct requests about just how communication could work better. So we're definitely trying to be responsive to that. I would say we're in the stage of building relationships with our partners, particularly around diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So, I tried to make a few notes. It's the library system. It's who we worked with for changing the lens. As I mentioned, I believe the senior team went to Undesign the Red Line. All of the senior team either went through the recent session or signed up for the next round of racial equity training. That's being done through the library system, which I do highly recommend. I've met with the Office of Human Rights and Equity at Howard County, the Housing Center, a lot of advocates, NAACP, some immigration, kind of new immigrant advocates. So I think that we're connecting to then be able to, in community work, you have to show up, and then you have to show up again. And then you have to do something you said you were going to do, and maybe by the third time you show up, you start to get the currency right and the trust to say, okay, what can we really do to work together? So I think we're making progress, but it does take time. In this category was also just making it a lot more easier to navigate CA. You'll see that we're making incremental changes on the website. That was a decision with marketing communications and obviously the senior team. Actually, we kind of did a work session around the website. We decided to do it incrementally and really kind of learn as we went along how to build out around programs. But you'll see that the navigation is changing as well as just the messaging, even on the homepage. And we've gotten some good feedback there. We have hired 2 senior team members. One has already started. Armsby Carbon is here as Director of IT. And our new general counsel will be starting on Monday, and that will be fantastic for the senior team to be back at fully on board and full capacity. And then we are in an effort, again, in the competitive landscape of hiring. In a lot of ways, CA was so well known in the community, the challenges had not been as deep. And, labor market is just that tight. We are working on updating that messaging. Really, my focus is on our differentiating factors are primarily our connection to mission and direct service, which definitely resonates. But then also our benefits package is highly competitive for our organization, with one of the key items being we pay and invest in your retirement whether you do or not. So that is our 401k program, and that is a real impressive benefit in my opinion. So community engagement, obviously out there, in the partnership way, but in terms of the wider community, we have been platforming a lot more just news around Columbia, events around Columbia. They don't have to be just CA. That's one I will say we get a lot of positive feedback about. As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of website changes. We've updated our Clare Bridge surveys just this past quarter, and you'll start to see that when we report out on second quarter. We added voluntary questions around demographics so we can start to better understand who we're serving, and then some questions around welcoming and how they're feeling in our community. We have had markedly increased CA participation at community events, and I'm very proud and just really tickled by, as I'm at those events, how creative our team is on what they'll have as an interactive activity at the tables. So it is a requirement. We can't just sit there and hand out brochures. So what I love is that it's always something new. It's either, make a comment on a board. We've had interactive maps, pin maps. We've had ping pong balls to go into the categories that you think are the priorities for CA. So we've had a lot of great ways to get engaged and, always thinking about children as well. We've started the Columbia Conversation effort, which, again, is a co-creation. We're kind of opening the door and nursing it along, and we continue to gradually increase. And I think that's really the goal with these kind of things. You've got to build trust in that platform and in that conversation. We have had increased coordination with advisory committees and staff liaisons. That's actually something that I have started working directly with staff liaisons and convening so that we have continued conversation around what we're doing with our advisory committees. Engagement with HOCO by Design. We have had a lot more staff outreach directly, ones with technical expertise directly with county council in the legislative process, particularly recently. And I think that's something I'm really proud of and has been very effective and actually led to additional meetings with other county departments and some county councilors. And that is really, of course, where we're trying to go, right? We have a technical expertise in-house that we want to share with the community. We have conducted our first interactive educational session. It was on stream restoration. We had, as you know, last week on fiscal year 23 budget, and we're planning ahead now for the next one. So as Jeremy mentioned tonight, we'll be highlighting climate vulnerability. We're talking about doing one around general plan, so we're starting to talk about what that schedule is going to look like. I will say in this category, for my goals and objectives, I had the CA 101, and still intending to do that, but in the new year, really kind of as we get into spring is more the timeline plan for that. And then I do want to make a point that we have actively promoted the CA Points Program, which is 21 years young. My understanding is it's the first time we as CA have actively promoted it.
Can you refresh my memory what that is?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the CA Points Program is the program that we have with elementary, middle, and high schools across Columbia. And any student that is on free and reduced meals is eligible based on getting good grades and good school attendance to actually earn not only themselves a CA membership, but potentially their entire family a membership. And that is a program that has been in existence. We're in our 21st year, and most people across the community are not aware of the program. So we are making people more aware.
How many kids do we have in that?
I don't know this year. I will say we actually had a challenge because it's one of those unintended consequences. Howard County is providing free lunches to all students this school year due to COVID. So not as many families signed up for free and reduced meals, even though that program actually gives you reduced fees to SATs and ACT and even college applications. A lot of people think it's only about the meals, so I can certainly report back on what that number is. We just closed out the application towards the end of October.
Lakey, in October, it was 583.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. Look at that.
I didn't catch it.
583.
583.
That's great.
That's great.
Okay, and then lastly, our big, what is our next business model instead of back to what we did pre-pandemic? So as I've touched on, we have initiated the realignment. I do want to be clear, that's a continuing transition. Doing that in real time means people transition, roles transition. You got to phase out and phase in. So it's going very well. I think even a lot of the mergers across teams have been well received. And then definitely pushing on hiring as really thinking about it as strategic additions and kind of capacity building. I work with a lot of the directors and managers to just make sure we hit the pause button and don't use the old job description, that we stop and we say, what do we need on this team? What other skill sets do we have? Is this a different job today than it was the last time we filled it? The CA team taking care of them is one of my top priorities. So we're trying to do that in a lot of different ways. We had our employee raises across the board in July 2021 at 3%. I'm doing quarterly employee forums, which is just an open Q&A on the spot with me, and they're recorded, and they've been great. I've really enjoyed them. A lot of good engagement and, again, some insightful questions. There's a lot more team gatherings going on. Part of that's just the function of everybody kind of being back and vaccinations. But those have been great. And, I try to engage in those. Senior management tries to engage in those. Probably my most favorite thing, and everybody knows this, I call them my field trips. I build into my schedule going out, on site in the field. My office, while it's nice, is not the most exciting place in CA. So I like to go where the exciting stuff is and see everybody and understand what we're actually achieving for the community. We are working through, the best way I could categorize it is kind of this idea of a reward for our employees that served during the pandemic, well before vaccines were available, on the ground and serving our community. As everyone here knows, we didn't receive CARES Fund outside of, explicitly school-age services. We did not get PPP, and we did not get American Rescue Funds. So that means we have to be real creative, and that means we have to find a way to do it within our operating budget, and we have been working towards that, and we have some creative solutions, but trying to make sure that's equitable is probably the biggest challenge that we want to be aware of. I continue to work with directors, as I was saying, what's working, what's not, what needs to change. That is a constant conversation. Nothing is taken kind of as is. Establishing a lot more cross-functional work groups. I have the ones listed: events and outreach, budget, plan development review, and then, as I mentioned, gathering the staff liaisons to actually share with each other, which has been a fun group to work with. Let's see, assisted in the 2 board retreats, which included, the finance training, as everybody here knows, because you participate, well, minus my 2 new members. Initiated the inventory of board-related policies. This has been a much bigger lift than I would have guessed. But okay, the chuckles tell me, I guess not.
Yeah, we told you.
So there's a lot of paper and binders and paper and notes and margins. So it is continuing. It is underway. We have a new general counsel on Monday, and that will be a priority project. So we have made progress. It's just not been progress that's been able to be reported out yet, because I think doing it in an electronic fashion in a database format is going to be a lot more effective. And then lastly, required the kind of our first step in diversity, equity, and inclusion workshop for all full-time employees. We got 96% above average feedback. So Changing the Lens did a great job. It's who's going to be doing the board training as well. And then really continuing to support the DE&I committee. We're in the midst of the rollout of voluntary pronoun usage, and they have more ideas behind that. But, my role is really just making sure that they get the support at a leadership level, that this is important across our organization. So. Okay, that's it. That's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. Is that all?
Any questions for Lakey on her? Tina?
I wanted to ask, you said there are 583 CA Points members this year. I don't imagine you have last year's numbers to do a comparison.
I think it's fewer. It's fewer.
I'm sure.
I do know that for sure from Jen. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Lakey.
I would value that.
Dan, Lakey, this is Lynn. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes. I was like, where's that voice coming from?
714 last year this time.
Wow.
Thank you.
COVID?
Look at that, Eric.
Y'all are terrifying.
Why weren't we able to get CARES funding or any of the other COVID relief fundings?
Do you want to address that, Susan?
So there were multiple reasons, some related to the size of the organization, and others because our IRS tax status is 501c4. So we thoroughly researched and, ran down every opportunity that was out there.
Jenny?
Yeah, with the points program, is that cost included in the income qualified section of the budget that is close to $1 million? Is that included or as a subsidy? If not, why not?
Okay, all questions on, on specific program, we're talking about the president's goals and objectives, so if you have specific questions, if you could please email them.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else regarding the president's goals and objectives? All right, thank you, and I did learn something because I had no idea. I mean, I think I had vaguely heard that before, but I did not know what it was, so. All right. So next section is the questions only. Anybody have any questions on any of those items?
Yes.
Yes, Dick.
On tracking forms, we had agreed at an earlier meeting that we were going to revisit the ethics policies. I didn't see that on the tracking form.
It's not on the tracking form?
I did not see it. No.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh, because I think we were waiting for our general counsel.
Okay. Monday.
I can put it on the tracking form. I'm happy to add it, but it is intended to be revisited, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Sherry?
I wanted to ask if I was looking for the latest 10-year financial plan, and I wasn't able to find it on our website or any other site. Can I get a copy of that sent? And maybe there are other people, certainly the new people.
I was going to say, we'll send it to the full board, yes.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one other quick thing. Now that we've got 2 new senior staff members, I think we're all looking forward to meeting them. So hope you'll truck them out where we can say hello.
I will more than trot them out. I will have them be engaged and share all of their expertise so you can be in shock and awe.
Okay, super.
All right, any proposed new topics? Okay, chair's remarks. I would also like to acknowledge Veterans Day and thank anyone on the board or listening or staff who are veterans or family of veterans. Thank you. Also, thank you again for all of the support that has gone into the budget process. I know that this has been a huge amount of effort, and I feel like our conversations have been really productive, so hopefully you all agree. I will send out something to see if folks would like to have an extra session that we will have to figure out how to make public to discuss budget items. Let's see here. All right, so, also, Lakey, thank you for your presentation tonight. I think that was a lot of good information. Will you be sending that out? Okay, and Jess also asked if you could please send
the memo electronically, yes.
Thank you. All right, let's see what's coming up. So Board Operations Committee is meeting here in person on Monday, November 29th at 7 p.m. And that will include the topics for the agendas for the December 9th board meeting, as well as the board work sessions and meetings in January and February. So currently, Tina and Andy are the board members slotted for that meeting. So if you have any conflict,
What's
please.
the date again?
It is November 29th.
I did it.
Okay. Our next board meeting is December 9th at 7, and as we discussed earlier, that one we will need to provide very clear guidance for staff. I think we made some good headway today. If there are additional details that folks feel like they need before they can have that conversation, keeping in mind that, we are going to need to leave leave the real detail to staff to propose for us. So, Sherry.
Janet, could you just do a summary, one
Yeah.
paragraph?
Well, I'm
where
going to do a
we are
bulleted
tonight
list.
so that
Yeah.
we know what we've eliminated and we know what we've thumbed up.
I will do that.
Thank you.
All right, so the packet for that meeting will be posted December 3rd.
Thank you.
And I think, as Lakey said, the 6 weeks following our December 9th meeting will be all hands on deck for the budget. So, I think the more info that we can provide, the better. All right.
Use that form that you sent out if we have any other questions to keep adding to that, or?
Yeah, I think, yes, and I think we hit the majority of the philosophical questions on that form tonight, because I was trying to have categories, but I will revisit too. And keep in mind too, I think there were a number of questions around changing memberships, and that's not really on the table right now. So I think we just all need to be aware that tweaks to memberships are one thing. An overhaul of memberships is not something that we do as part of the budget process. And I think, Andy commented on that as well in his emailed comments, and that
2-year process.
Yeah, it's a lengthy process, and there's a lot of information involved. And so we just need to keep that in mind, and it'd be lovely to have that, computer program that you just move this thing and it spits all the information out, but we don't have that. So
yes.
Anyway, so I think there are membership questions that may not be able to be answered. Sure.
Yeah, I think there were some very concrete suggestions that were made, and I think there are some more detailed questions that have come up. I think it would be a good idea if we could at least throw these all in a bucket so that we don't lose them for the future, because the budget process is a 2-year process. So I would hate to lose any of the good ideas that are coming in, for example, from the Aquatics Advisory Committee. And there may be other committees that are going to feed into this as well. Let's just get everything consolidated in one place so that we can easily go back and revisit it.
Maybe that can live with the new policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I can commit that we'll try and figure out how to kind of capture it and get it consolidated. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion?
Wait,
Oh,
I had
yeah.
one quick announcement. I forgot to say it. E-scooter demo day this Saturday. You got an email about it. We'll send a reminder tomorrow. I unfortunately will be out of town on a family vacation. Otherwise, I would be there with bells on, active transportation, test it out. My understanding is the company's doing it, kind of as a preview for spring, before the weather gets nasty, but just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Jenny moved. Tina seconded. Any objection?
No.
Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.